like as I grow older, the things that I never used to like when I was younger, and now they give me peace. Like currently, I'm finding peace in gardening and just watching things grow and just dealing with the soil and water. What are you doing currently that's giving you peace? Where's your peaceful space in life right now?
Well, first of all, I just love it when young people say, as I grow older. It's so cute. As I grow older.
No, don't let the Inivie Rushanda, but
Okay.
I'm like going for my 50s there.
Oh, congratulations. I think realizing that it doesn't have to be a particular way. That's probably the thing that's giving me peace. That it's okay to actually allow life to be, and not for it to be the way that I visualized or designed in my head. That it's going to turn out differently, and that is okay.
Sounds like a let go and let God type of mentality.
I mean, I wouldn't go quite that far, because that would imply that I don't worry. But I have my mantras, and one of them is everything is unfolding as it should. Everything happens at the right time. Everything is always working out for me. And I mean, what do you need to do with that? Besides, just accept it.
All right, I get you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of The Bold Exchange. Today I'm joined by a very, very amazing guest. This is Thembe Khumalo, mother, storyteller, brand builder, a stop worrying expert. Thembe, welcome to The Bold Exchange.
Thank you. I love the name of your program. Fantastic.
It's unfortunate, the person... I used to try to go to The Bold Exchange to land. Yeah. Like when I have conversations with people, I always want to find what makes them, the context to them. What's Thembe like in high school? Like when you now try, like career guidance, and what were you, because in the Miss Zimbabwe, Miss Malaika, Miss what beauty pageants and stuff. What's Thembe like at 16 in high school? What's going on in your life?
I think to get the correct answer to that, I have to start with Thembe at like 6 or 7. A very happy, very smiley, but very shy child. So shy. I remember I used to literally clutch my mother's skirts after church, and I would hide behind her because I didn't want to greet people. And that moved with me into high school. But I also had, apparently they said I had leadership qualities. So I ended up in front. So prefecting and interacting and junior city councilling, and all of these things that forced me to kind of come out of my shell. But I think that shy little girl is always there. And I have found her to be a very useful companion, because especially now in a world where so much of our lives is out in the public and overexposure of personal brands, I find that she helps me to retain my privacy and to remain rooted in the things that really matter.
Interesting. So, like you mentioned something interesting about the junior counseling and stuff. Do you mind me asking what high school you went to?
Dominican convent. I'm a very proud convent girl from Bulawayo.
Like I was a Milton, right? And I wanted to ask something like, do you feel like currently the way the schools that we have currently are set up, are they still grooming young women and young men to actually be respectable people in society, whether it comes to etiquette and when it comes to like just being gentle people and like being well-groomed human beings. Because, you know, like when I was there, I remember you couldn't get into town with dusty shoes. You had to have a hymn book. You had to wear your blazer right. When you met a prefect, you had to say morning, sir. And, you know, like you had to tip your hat to someone older than you and everything else. Do you feel like currently, because of this whole, no, it's bullying, it's what, do you feel like our current schools are actually grooming human beings to be like commendable human beings in society?
I think what has changed is what is commendable.
Wow. Profound. Okay.
So the things that mattered then, for instance, we weren't allowed to eat in public.
Oh yeah.
Like to
I still
walk in
cringe
the
at that.
street eating your apple or drinking your Coke was a punishable thing at school. And I think things like that don't matter to a lot of people anymore. I think they probably matter to you if you are a person who practices those sort of things. They may make you a little bit more judgy of
athletics, yeah. Like,
yeah.
I always find it weird, like, Nana is big Kombi or in like just in public. And
Yeah.
Oh, you could have waited 20 minutes to get home.
Yeah. Or even like eating in the bus, you know, just like tucking in and everyone around you can smell your food. It's like, I want to believe that rules and even laws are there to make life easier.
True.
Once a rule starts making life harder, there's a problem.
A problem there.
Yeah. So the rules that were there, for instance, you don't want to eat on the bus and have everybody smelling your food, and it's like, it's not a good experience for them. So the rule is there so that everyone can have a good experience of this journey. And sometimes we discard the propriety that was important back then without taking into account the reasons it was there and how it helped make life easier for everyone else, as well as yourself, I think.
And, you know, speaking to that, the other thing you told me about, like the 6-year-old shy Thembe, is you with your mom at church. At what important role did the church upbringing impact your life?
Oh my goodness, it was huge. My father's father was a bishop.
All right.
So church was very much a part of our lives. Still is in the family. And it wasn't optional, you know. So a lot of our lives was centered around the church. Church activities, church friends, church, yeah. You know, evening prayers at home involved singing hymns, doing a Bible reading, kneeling down to pray as a family. And that happened from childhood all the way to adulthood. So, and I think also it was a very conservative family environment. So you have the church piece and you have the very conservative piece. And then my parents were both educators.
Oh, right.
So it was like layer upon layer of...
And then high school, the nuns are having a chat with you as well. And
yeah, so the opportunity for deviant behavior
was very limited, like across the board.
Extremely limited, yeah.
And so at what age do you then start seeing and developing you as a character? Like at what age do you say, okay, I'm my own person, I don't want to be... Well, you're an educator because you educate people about how to actually carry themselves as brands. But I'm saying, how do you carve your own path and say, this is what I want to do? What makes you then say, at 22, say, I want to leave the city that I'm in and relocate to a different city?
I think adolescence did that for me. Just questioning everything, questioning the rules, questioning the... You know, I remember in one discussion saying to my mom, but mina ngokubona kwami. And she was like,
wena awulambono lapha.
like,
Khale sami sicathule lapha wena awulambono.
what
mbono
could you possibly have developed? You know, which is a huge contrast to how we raise kids now, right? Where they're taught to have an opinion from birth almost, you know. People be like, oh no, my baby doesn't like bananas or whatever it is. So yeah, I became that child that was always questioning, always wondering. And interesting thing, I feel like media played a big part in who I became. And why I think it's interesting, because we weren't allowed to watch TV during the week.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So TV was from Friday night to Sunday and school holidays. So as an adolescent, not allowed to watch TV, but the TV that I did watch, I really internalized. My favorite program was Fame.
All right.
Do you know Fame? Oh, I'm so sorry.
No. Like you can start me off with Santa Barbara going.
Oh, okay. So Fame was this program that was set in the School of Arts.
Oh, like backstage.
I don't know backstage. Sorry.
No, backstage is like the SA version rendition or like
kind of. So you had dancers and people who played instruments and all these characters and all these. I was obsessed. I wanted to be one of the kids from Fame. And every week, you know, it would end with like a performance, with singing and dance. That was like my dream. So that fueled a lot of my fantasies. I read a lot of magazines. So I emerged as this person that is not the person my parents raised me to be.
All right.
Yeah.
And
which I think was very hard for them.
And how did they deal with that? Like, you know, coming from, you got bishops and elders. And,
yeah, so my parents were very strict. But I was the last of 4.
Yeah, come on, the other guys that giving them enough hard time that they were a bit soft on you.
So I think part of it was bewildering for them to say, like, where did you come from? Because nobody else was like that. Nobody else gave them this particular type of pushback in terms of the things that I loved and enjoyed. You know, I wanted to perm my hair and pierce my ears and all the things that we weren't allowed to do. Yeah. So it was almost inevitable that I would be the one that would say, okay, this environment, it's too small for me. It's like...
And too slow for me, the things that are burning inside.
The things I'm chasing, I've got to be somewhere else.
How did that conversation go when you now say, yo, I'm up and leaving? Is it Harare first or is it all across the world?
It went very badly. It was heavily opposed. I mean, in those days, you didn't just go and set yourself up in a flat as a girl.
Yeah.
Unless you were, you know,
in
the profession. So it was, when I think about it now as a parent, I feel bad for my parents. But I also feel like I can't think of another way that I could have done it in that situation. So in the end, I did leave without support, without endorsement. And so obviously when I got to Harare, it was very important to me to not make the prophecies of doom.
Not to prove them right.
Yeah. Exactly. And my plan was I was going to be in Harare for 2 years. I was going to go to South Africa for 2 years. And then I was going to go to America. And that would be my final
picture perfect, yeah.
I mean, I applaud the job that American propaganda did with their entertainment industry. I mean, it was like America is nirvana. That's what I thought as a kid.
You know, like speaking of that, like of the propaganda, I was actually talking to a friend the other day. I was like, do you know that Ewistic, that decode Ewistic is responsible for a lot of people thinking that if you just go to South Africa, a cell phone can be $7.99, and you know, like how that propaganda was watching SAP, and during that time things were tough in Zim, and you're like, so those people are actually eating beef for like 28.99 rand, and then you understand.
And then half of Zimbabwe, but double up.
And then they went to SA, and then only to see that wow, the reality is really sad.
Yeah.
So you moved to Harare, and you're coming from a slightly small city to Harare. It's faster. It's people are more expressive this side. They're louder. They, you know, like, how does that impact you, and how do you navigate like the whole landscape at that time? You're fairly young at that age as well.
Not so much young as naive.
All right.
Because I'd had this very sheltered childhood. You know, until I left home, I don't think I'd ever slept at anyone else's house except my aunt for like 3 nights.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were really sheltered.
Yeah. So it was a big adventure for me. Everything was new. Everything was exciting. I could have my girlfriend come over and she didn't have to go home. It was like, wow. I was just living my dream. I was very, very broke. You know, there were days when I would buy umumbu, 1 cob. I'd boil it. I'd have half of it for supper. Then I'd take the other half for lunch at work the next day. But I was happy. It was a big adventure. Yeah.
And
so, by the way, that makes me it's hard for me to empathize with youngsters when they say they're suffering.
Oh yeah. Like I always say that. I'm like, you guys have it so easy.
Yeah.
Like, even, you know, like how I was actually telling someone that like Tina Sakula, or to like maybe the nearest landline was like 6 houses away, and then if someone called, you have to then walk 6 houses away and then come back. But so, explain to me, what's your first job? What are you doing? You're saying you're going to work. What work were you doing? What were you involved in at 22 in Harare for the first time?
I was a PA, a personal assistant, which is basically a secretary.
All right.
I did typing, filing, running errands for my boss, all that kind of stuff. And I'm so glad that I got that foundation, because it also made me, I think, in addition to being a convent girl and in addition to being raised by educators, it made me very organized. So I was very good at making order out of chaos. I still am. And I think even the way I think has a lot to do with that kind of training. I want to simplify things. Even when I write, I want to make things as simple as possible.
And speaking of, you mentioned something about leadership earlier on. You're like, yo, you rose through the ranks, you know, from being a class monitor to what do you feel is the number one problem that we have when it comes to leadership in organizations, in company firms in Zimbabwe? What's the main problem? Because you're very big on speaking on leadership. What's the main problem that we have when it comes to leadership in different fields across the board in Zimbabwe?
I think the biggest problem we have is that we think leaders are someone else. We, the led, don't realize that we are the leaders. So we have all these expectations that we put on people who are leading us, but we don't put them on ourselves. But where do leaders come from?
They come from...
Nobody parachutes them into our communities or our government or our schools or our churches. We raise them. They're our kids. They're our uncles. They're our brothers, our aunties. Like, leaders are us. They come from us. So if our leaders are bad, or if our leaders are selfish, or if our leaders are too strict, or whatever it is, it's what we've made. You know, they're a reflection of who we are as communities, as families. And then we sit back and we say, the leaders should be doing this and the leaders should be doing that. But you have to start leadership at a micro level. So if you cannot put your hand up at your child's school and say, this is a problem, I don't want to be buying toilet paper for the school toilets because I think
I pay
it should be covered in the school fees. And you can't go to your church and put your hand up and say, I have a problem with the finances. They're not transparent, and we need to know how the offerings are being spent. If you can't do that at that level, why do you think you can wake up one morning and change? Like, people are always saying, oh, people should go out and toy. People should, like, if they don't have the courage to say, can I have an appointment with the headmistress?
It's like, I like how you even place that. It's like how you always deemed like unonesa, like let's say you get a bad service at a place in a shop. Like,
yeah.
Listen, I'm paid for the service.
Yeah.
It's not a donation. The least you can do is like just respect, and then people tend. So I think it's actually a culture of accountability that we lack, where even if you hold people accountable at just a shop level or a maraini level, like say, yo guys, I mean, really, we can't be waiting for the city council to come collect this rubbish.
Like, seriously.
And someone will be like, like, especially like where I stay, people got a tendency of throwing like rubbish into the greenways. And I'm like, yo, guys, this is just your backyard. You do understand that this is your backyard, right? So I feel like we have a problem with accountability. And where do you think that stems from?
Ooh. I don't know. And having said that, I also think one of the problems that we have is a culture of not being willing to say, I don't know. You never hear your pastors, your headmasters, your community leaders saying, actually,
I don't know.
I don't know. Isn't that weird?
True.
Like, how can you have people that always have an answer to every question? There's nothing that they don't know. Like, there's some things that, particularly in churches, because I think church has such a hold
on people,
on the community's psyche, the way people organize themselves and their families, the habits, all of the things that they do. Church leaders have to be so careful, so modest about what they know. My favorite Bible verse is the one that says, what we know in part.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And do you feel like what I was saying, which is the accountability part, right? Do you feel like you're talking about Uguti, you were bringing suggestion and to your parents and stuff, and do you feel like that's also in our bringing? Do you think that's the reason why children from like less privileged backgrounds actually struggle in varsity, where in varsity people are actually encouraged to be more inquisitive, and we grow up in societies and in homes where we're told you do not question the adults. The adults say this, because I was reading an article about it. Uguti, like they found Uguti, children from less privileged homes were struggling at varsities because of the culture show, because of the fact that you can't speak you can't ask questions to adults.
So I wouldn't say it's about being from less privileged homes. I would say it's about being from authoritarian homes, and those can be in any spectrum of the socioeconomic grid, because there are homes, affluent homes, where people are not allowed to speak up. And I think it's a very fine line, because in our home, for example, I was not expected to speak up, but I was expected to think for myself. And I don't know how our parents managed that very delicate balance, but they did it, So there was a lot of discipline around how you conduct yourself as a child, but there was also a lot of freedom around critical thinking. Yeah. So I don't know if you've read Malcolm Gladwell's book and the story he tells about Korean pilots and how the Korean airlines were having so many of these accidents and they couldn't figure out why.
Is it The Outliers?
I mix up his books, so I'm not sure which one. I've read, I think, most of them. But he's saying when they dug deeper, they realized that the relationship that the pilots have with authority and the co-pilot. So the co-pilot would be able to see what was going wrong, but because this guy is in charge, not inkani, I defer to authority. So I won't tell authority that authority is wrong.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing analogy.
And they were losing lives because of this. But it was so ingrained in the psyche and the social setup that it was just the way it was. So they had to do a lot of, I guess, unteaching for them to unlearn.
Let's talk branding, right? And let's talk personal branding. What are the 5 key guys? 9.99. This is now a masterclass coming.
No pressure.
What are some of the guidelines that you what are some of the 5 guidelines you have to look into if you're saying I want to present myself in a certain way and work on a personal brand? Let's just say me, for example, I want to be, a proper well-crafted human being. Like what are some of the tips that you would give to me?
Well, I love that you've just decided that there's 5.
Okay. Well, okay, let's go.
Okay. The first thing I would say, we always start with purpose. What are you doing? Like, where are you going with this? What's the end game? Because that's going to help us with everything else. So if you are sitting here and your goal is to one day sit on the board of maybe the International Federation of Media People, then there's a path that we're going to map for you to take you there. If you're sitting here and you want to be an entertainer, like a Harare hood,
right.
At the top of that game, we're going to take a completely different path, aren't we? So you can't just say, I want to build my brand without knowing
the purpose,
what the end game of the building process is. So definitely purpose would be your first stop, and just getting some clarity around that. The second thing I would say is the people. Having a clear picture of who the audiences that you want to influence is important. Even when you're building a product brand or a corporate brand, your customer essentially is the center of the world, because your business, your brand, your whatever it is you're doing is not about you, it's about them. Because your brand is actually their experience of you. It's not what you say you are. It's what they experience you to be. So that's the second thing. You want to get clarity about who are you influencing and what matters to them, because they're the people that are going to take you where you want to go. The third thing I would say is, I didn't do that, is understanding the problem that you solve. That can be a little bit tricky. I think people are not used to maybe thinking of themselves as a solution. So I come with these attributes. I come with this life experience. I come with this richness of humanity. What problem does this package solve? What is it ideally poised to solve? So in fact, in my personal branding coaching program, That's what we do. We look at your whole life story and we say, with all this, what can we build? What are you ideally poised to create, to solve? What solution are you ideally poised to deliver?
And before you go further, what's the personal brand? Information like, where is that personal brand found?
ThembeKhumalo.com, brandbuilderafrica.com. At Thembe Khumalo everywhere. Like if you find Thembe Lihle or T Khumalo, it's not me.
What are some of the challenges? What has been one of the most difficult challenges that you faced in when building brands? You know, I remember reading an article about you saying like the things that you learned when you got fired by a client, like in like 2 clients actually. Like, what are some of the lessons that you learned, and what are some of the challenges that you've experienced in the space that you come in, that you work in?
I think probably an underappreciation of what branding is, because it's kind of a concept that maybe the language around it has been misused. Another thing is, particularly with personal branding, is a lack of authenticity. In fact, let me put it this way. You have to be courageous with your brand and with your business, I think, to do well. And I think a lot of people don't have that courage, the courage to stand out. So in my 5 Ps that I was giving you, one of them is the proposition. What makes you different from and better than everyone else who is solving the same problem that you solve? That takes courage to be able to stand out, because it's so tempting to fit in. It's so much easier to fit in. But fitting in is actually the death of your brand, because then we don't have a reason to choose you. You've become a commodity. Like maize is maize is maize is maize. Until it's in a bag with a label and it's like nutrition added, and then it's different.
All right.
So I think I would say those off the top of my head.
And speaking of branding, right? And, you know, I look at different brands, you know, like earlier on, we're talking about like how the American propaganda is work. That's like Brand America, you know, like, thank you for the service. You even know 911, like, you know some stuff, like,
yes,
it's big branding, you know what I mean? Yes. You look at the essays, you know, you look, Generation was a form of like essay media branding, like, you know, what if you were given the task to say, yo, let's try brand Zimbabwe in its current state, how would you go about taking on that task?
That would be my dream job. But I would have to have a lot of authority, because the first thing I would do is make sure that all the pieces that make up a nation brand are working together. So it's not just about tourism. It's not just about government. It's not just about investment. It also includes people, sport, culture. All those pieces have to come into the conversation and have to agree. And then I would do a survey with maybe 20,000 people and say, what makes you most proud to be Zimbabwean in the area of sport? What makes you most proud to be Zimbabwean in the area of history, culture, food, whatever it is? And then I would gather all those things, because now it's the Zimbabwean people telling us what Brand Zimbabwe is. It's not top down. It's a collective, involved community effort. And then that's what I would use to formulate my strategy for Brand Zimbabwe.
You know, you mentioned sport, and you're very much into sport. Like, what can be done currently with the way our sporting sector looks when it comes to, like, you know, just the support that they have, and, you know, because it seems like cricket and those sport Zimbabwe, like what can we do in that space?
Everything starts at home, guys. there are people in this studio who can tell you the names of every Manchester United player.
I'm one of them.
Not only currently, but historically.
Yeah, like there are only 2 teams in the world, Manchester United. Period.
And they're so invested in what happens. When Manchester's playing, kumba kubikwe or kunobikwa early, abantu abalali when they lose, and emotionally invested. But if your kid comes home and says, Dad, we've got soccer trials tomorrow, and also I have a maths exam, what are you going to say?
Mwanangu Pythagoras theorem but yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
You're gonna opt for school. That's a
We're
given.
driving our kids into this academic rigor, but in our heart of hearts, we're invested in sport. What does that mean? Like, who are we? Can we decide who we actually are? And I think if we gave our kids, because that's where it starts, our kids the same support for sporting and sporting activities. Girls, it's like you can't go and play netball before you've cleaned the house. You can't, it doesn't matter how important it is. It doesn't matter if you're playing for the national team, urimwana, urimskana, etc., etc. So I think if we started at that micro level in our homes, supporting sport in that way, we would emerge with a very different mindset around sport, because even the people that develop the policies and allocate the budgets are people who've grown up in our families.
True.
Yeah.
And just circling back on the branding issue about the country, right? Like, do you feel like we as a people also are not prideful enough in being who we are and in exporting our culture and our brand Zimbabwe across the world? You can tell an American in any country, whether it's in India, in Zimbabwe, an American will always be, whether it's a Nigerian in New York or in London or in Mbare, a Nigerian will be a Nigerian. Do you feel like we also are to blame for not being able to export brand Zimbabwe and put it out there in the world, to the world?
Yes.
And how do we?
100% yes. I think we have a lot of shame. I would even go so far as to say some self-hate. We are very good at putting ourselves down, minimizing the things that are good and great about ourselves, we're experts at finding the problem issues, but not so much the things that surprise and delight. And it's very sad. Like, I'm sad about that.
And the Jamaicans are known for sprinting, the Kenyans for the long distance, Europeans for soccer. What can we be known for? What are some of the low-hanging fruits then, like Zim and Africa can actually be known for out there in the world when it comes to even sport?
I would say people. I think Zimbabweans are very unique in our openness, our warmth, our hospitality. We're also our work ethic is exceptional. When you're part of a team with people from other countries, that's when you really see that, yeah, we work. We have developed a huge pool of professionals that we've exported out of the country. We've stuck a horrible name on it, which is called brain drain.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of saying we export intellect. Like, it's an export. It actually brings revenue. It brings...
Yeah, like
it contributes to the GDP significantly.
Like, the remittances were actually high because of the people who were actually sending money from the so-called brain.
So it's that whole reframe. We just need to constantly reframe. And I think if we did that, it's endless. I mean, natural resources, flora and fauna, and Should I mention the Victoria Falls?
Like speaking of that, like what role then does culture play, in us building this national brand? Because, of late, I'm sure you've seen them. Traffic lights taking some clearly from other cultures, so what role does culture play in actually trying to build this brand in Zimbabwe, and what role can culture play in trying to export this brand called Zimbabwe?
Our cultures are so complete. They have a usefulness in so many areas of life, and so rich, whether it's food or raising kids or, how to think, that I really believe we have undervalued and underutilized culture. So for example, is Thagazelo. When you say Thembe Khumalo, Thembe Chobana, I mean, I could go on, but I don't want to bore you.
No.
That is a source of cultural pride. When you greet your friend and you say Mofu, those are things that are sources of pride. But somehow we create this division between what happens at home and what we call professional. At home, for example, Zimbabweans are very hospitable. Like, you can't come to my house and not drink tea or eat something or go away with something. Like, when you leave my house, you must be holding something that says, I value you. But when we go into the workplace and we have what we think is professional behavior, we can be quite hostile.
True.
So I think that model of officiousness as opposed to professionalism is what we need to bring down and bring home into our workplaces and our politics and our everything else. Because that's when culture will become part of who we are in a way that we can export it. Also, we are so talented in the cultural industries, in singing, acting, dancing, poetry, writing, but we're not talking enough about it because we haven't yet learned the high value that it has and what it can bring.
Do you feel like it comes from a place of seeking instant gratification, like like say with what you do professionally, you've put in the work years and years and years and years and years, and someone right now thinks that they can just whip up the logo, have an Instagram page, and things are gonna fire like that?
I mean, I think that is an issue, but I think a bigger part of the problem is really in how we were trained to think from the colonial era. So we haven't somehow come out of that. And I think that's where a big part of the self-hate and the sense of shame comes from.
Wow. So there's a line where you say that you are like a child who goes and passes all the exams, but you cannot explain the concept. And that's like one of the extras. You're like, there's another line where you're like, you remind me of, you are like our daughter's imaginary friend that she had in preschool. All nice, but agola. Like, that's from your latest book, Words and Other Weapons. Guys, go get it. It's out there. Explain to me more what inspired you to say, you know what, let me botanisa my thoughts and put them in 22 lovely, beautiful pieces of stories and essays.
I didn't actually have that kind of inspiring event or situation. I grew up writing. I've been telling stories all my life. I've been journaling since I could write. So it's kind of a natural evolution. And you might maybe ask why now? Because I journal all the time, and sometimes those extracts make it into the public space, like when I was a columnist, or onto my blog, or when I have time, or when it's part of the season's goals. I always thought I should write a book because I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller. There's no debate. And what I did is to set aside some time in my business where I appointed an MD and said, please run the company. Next year, I want to focus on writing. So for that year, I did the bare minimum amount of work that I needed to do to stay fed and clothed, and spent the rest of that time writing. So I now had the space to do that. And the book that I set out to write is actually not that book.
Wow.
Is the book that I'm still writing. But I pressured myself and said, you have to produce a book in this year because, these are the sacrifices you've made to produce a book. So if you haven't finished the book you set out to write, which book are you going to publish this year? Oh. So that's how that happened.
Why words and other weapons? What are the other weapons? I know words can be very piercing, and yours were really piercing in this book.
I think the title is deliberately ambiguous, and the stories will tell you what the other weapons are. I can't even say that I know what the other weapons are. And that's the conundrum of being a writer, is that the stories will do what the stories want to do.
There's a story about motherhood, and that seems to be like letters to your child, and like what did it take, and where were you drawing from when you're writing that particular story about motherhood, and what were you drawing from? Was it from personal experience as a mom, or was it just fiction, like
from American TV? Motherhood is a huge part of my life. First of all, from the one who mothered me. My mother is a huge character in my psyche. She's an amazing, so fierce. And I always think if I could just be more like her. She's so brave, So I definitely wanted to talk about that. And I feel like women's relationships with motherhood, with their mothers and with their daughters, are so complex and so rich. I'm constantly observing and learning and getting new insights on that. And then, of course, having two daughters of my own. And I think being a mother of daughters, especially, is so fascinating. And at the stage in my life where I'm watching them metamorphosize into women, and having conversations with them. Like the other day I was saying to my daughter, you can't talk to him like that. You're thinking like a woman and he's a man. It won't work.
She was using a woman brain on a guy.
Yeah. But then it struck me, she's actually a woman. That's amazing to me.
And how, it's a very crazy world that we live in, and a bit unsafe out there. But how then did you protect your kids to actually grow up and be well-rounded human beings? Spawn designating out there, you'll be like, yo, whose daughter is this one? But how did you manage to parent your way through that?
With great difficulty. Parenting is so hard, and a lot of times the child that you parent is not what emerges. I think a lot of parents are having that experience where they're saying, but I
did everything that was up to the book.
And look, I think my parenting philosophy is that I don't have many rules, but the ones that are there are not negotiable. I expect a lot of self-management. And the rule is manage yourself within the boundaries of our philosophy and vision as a family. Manage yourself. If you do not manage yourself, I will have to come in and manage you. And you do not want that. I do not want that. It will not be a good experience.
Sounds like you're gonna hit them with a bill like you are consulting now. Like, I got off my job to come manage your personal brand.
Like, what are you doing? Why are you making me manage you? So I would say, and of course, no TV during the week.
Earlier on, like there's a piece you showed me where you said that helped, like that particular piece was you dealing with pain and loss. Explain to me more about that particular piece that's in this book.
So one of the privileges that I've had for someone who's worked in media and communication is that I got to run hospice for a few years. And one of the things I learned in hospice care is that all change is loss, even when the change is good. That piece of knowledge has been so valuable in my life because it has helped me to understand that someone might be grieving even if no one has died.
Wow.
They are grieving a big, important change that has happened in their life. And so we have to treat it as loss and grieving. My own experiences with loss and grief, have been seminal in that way, where you recognize that you have to give space for grief. And grief is a complicated process. It's not some kind of linear,
Oh, true.
Yeah. It's a jagged line graph with pauses and breaks and backtracking and complications. So no one person's experience of grief is the same as another person's. So it's not even comparative. And that is such a human thing.
And tell me about did you find healing when you're working on this book? Like from personal experience, whatever was going on through your mind, was it a more therapeutic type of book, this one, or the one you're writing is the one that you're now finding more about yourself?
No, I do not find that healing and therapeutic. I don't know where those writers
actually did come from. Or you just...
what happens to me when I'm writing an emotional piece is that it wrings me and tears me and crushes me and drains me and exhausts me. If I start on a piece in the morning and I finish it the same day, I cannot do anything else. I feel like I have been hit by a truck.
No,
it is a very emotional process for me, and I salute the people that write volumes and volumes and come out feeling
no, you know what I'm saying, because like there's a piece in particular, like remember the piece I quoted about, like it seems like you were like the piece where you're talking about Uguti, you like a kid who can who writes an exam, and those are like deep cutting, like I even felt touched when I was reading those words, right? Yeah. So like, I wonder where you draw such inspiration from, and if it's real life situations, then I'm like, yo, I feel sorry for whatever those words are coming at, because I would want to even argue with you in like real life if it wasn't, you know what I mean? So like,
yeah.
Where do you draw all that from?
Life, my life, the lives of people around me. But I think my approach to life is maybe what gives me the added insights, because I think it's very important to spend time by yourself. You cannot be a complete human being if you are constantly surrounded by other people. You really have to take time and carve out time for solitude, because how can you think new thoughts if you're always engaged? And when I say alone, I mean without your phone as well.
Not alone with your phone.
Alone, but you're scrolling, because those are other people's thoughts constantly in you and at you. So for you to think original thoughts, you know, people talk about thought leadership. Original thoughts are like
really radical, because you'd be like, okay, that sounds like Malcolm X. Well, that sounds like that's the beat my angel.
Exactly. So you need to it's like a garden. For you to grow original thoughts, you need to prepare a field and fertilize it and water it so that original thoughts can grow. You know, one day I was thinking, I had a thought that frightened me. I thought, in the beginning, man created God and made him in his own image. And then I thought, heresy, blasphemy, put it away. And I put the thought away for years. I didn't go back to it. And then years later, I thought, you know, this is what we do as human beings. We form a concept of God that is modeled on who we are and how we are.
And how we think.
And behave. But it's the other way around. And so I could pull that thought out of the dark cupboard and explore it some more. But I could never do that if I'm always with other people and always consuming what other people's thoughts.
That thought, Christians, but take it, let's interrogate that thought. Yeah.
I had to develop it further for it to sit well with me.
And where did you end up? You still realize that? Let's take a deep dive into that thought. You're saying men created God in their own image?
Because I think the systems that run the world are systems of control, systems of organization, and so on. So when the church system, if I can call it that, developed, it was about how do we manage these people? How do we control them? How do we stay in charge? And that is really taking on the role of God. Like you're creating your own God there, because that's not what God created. And even when I look at Jesus and how he lived his life, how radical he was, he would answer sideways all the time. And just I think of him as a very difficult person.
And he would hang out with the most undesirable of people.
Right? And then we look at what we consider to be
righteous,
Christian, righteous, godly followers of Christ. It's so far removed from who the man was. It's fascinating and also sad.
You know, like the other time I was actually thinking to myself, I also did a scary thought, but my scary thought was not as scary as yours. My scary thought was like, when you look at the world, right, and how diverse it is, right? how diverse everything in the world is. When you just look at nature in itself, how diverse it is. I was like, I do not think you can probably speak to the person who actually created all this diversity, all these plums, apples, and pears, rhinos, and giraffes. I do not think he would just say, you need to speak to me in a certain language, in a certain way.
You're so right.
I was like, that can't be it, hey? So my question is, what's your take on like just how on isintu sethu like I don't like you're Zulu royalty, right? You're Ndebele royalty.
Yes.
Like, what's your take on isintu sethu and how do we preserve our culture? Because people tend to think what isintu sethu is like maybe we are praising some 1,000 armies or some 10,000, but it's still God.
I think it's one of the saddest and most insidious jobs and probably most successful jobs that colonization did, was to separate us from our culture and traditions. And I think it was essential for them to do that for purposes of control. So I think where one should definitely invest in re-educating oneself, because it's not a mass thing. Kwathiwa sithi, bathi si, like you have to have give your own account of your own self and your own life for you to feel like a real complete human being and to sit comfortably in your skin. So, and part of that is your unlearning and relearning things that it doesn't matter who taught you what. You have to, for your own self, as Jesus said, who do you say I am? Bati ungu. But you, who do you say I am for your own self? Yeah.
And like how when they even asked Jesus, but you're saying you're the Son of God, and then he's like, didn't I say that you guys are actually the God? Like, I totally get it, right? Like, it's
but you see how he's like this.
Yeah. Like,
sideways, all the time sideways.
If he was in 2024, was that Anoganza? This book needs to be read by a lot of people, a lot of young women. I want to talk about young women specifically because I like your young people like out there and what if you were to talk to the girl child, what advice would you give the current girl child right now? Just talk to them like you're talking to your daughters, mother of daughters.
Nana. That is how I would start. I'd say Zazi. Know yourself. Know what you're about so that nobody else is going to tell you who you are and what you're about and what you should be about. You've got to know that for yourself. I would say spend some time by yourself. Just nje upungicabanga nje. Hambele, take a walk ungela my headphones. Just to know yourself. Probably you don't even know what you like. You just like the things that other people like. And it's never too late. Like, don't think because, now I'm 25, now I'm 30, now I'm 40. And I still don't actually know what I like or who I am or what I'm about. It's never too late. Go back to when you were tiny, when you were 4 and 7 and 9, before the world got to you. What was giving you joy then? And maybe try and lean into that. I would also say that there are not every piece of advice is relevant and good for every season in your life. So if I say to you, what's a good piece of advice to give a girl? Focus on your schoolwork, as my parents always told me. Focus on work. focus on your career. That is good advice, but it's not necessarily relevant for every season. You know, when they say women can have it all, I believe it's true, but they can't have all of it all of the time at the same time. There's a season. There's a season in which you will lean into motherhood. There's a season in which you'll lean into your career. There's a season you'll lean into being an amazing partner to your spouse. And you'd be hard pressed to do all of that all at the same time. That's what I would say. So relax and understand the season that you're in.
You know, like the you were talking earlier on, Usitu Awugela, the interview. Noma said something interesting. And I want to pick your brain on this. She said that gender roles are there for effectiveness. Do you believe in that statement?
Yeah, I think originally. So here's the thing with the whole gender debate. African culture does not oppress women.
True.
So I think that's a thought that we really need to
get rid of,
internalize, and like, African culture does not oppress women. The battle of the sexes is something that comes with colonization. In a traditional pre-colonial, it's certainly in Southern Africa, homestead, a woman has a lot of power.
True.
Ubabekazi is one of the most powerful roles that exist in the family hierarchy, and it can only be done by a woman. A woman has jobs that are tasks that are relevant to her biology even. Like, we're not fighting nature and we're not oppressing one another. We're organized in a system that works and a system that delivers, until somebody else comes from outside and says,
that's oppressive.
No, for my agenda, actually, this is not how I want things.
And you know, the funny thing, whoever comes with that as well comes and then says, no, women are not. Imagine they're telling you that you're being oppressive to women, but the document is bringing to you, tells you, no, women are not supposed to stand in front of men.
Dude. And then, years later, when women are now frazzled and overwhelmed with all of these roles that they are trying to juggle, and men are standing in the corner going, so mina vele vele kanti,
where do I play? Where do I fit in?
What am I for? Then you want to start like reworking your arguments, and yeah,
you know,
it's a mess.
You talked to young girls and young women out there, right? And I remember at a time when I was just before I went sober and I quit alcohol, I had a talk with you, and you know, we had a quite harsh, tough conversation.
Was it?
No, it wasn't harsh.
Am I ever tough?
No, we had a tough conversation about like just realities and branding and stuff like that. And I want to know, what's your take on the current state of, I don't want to say masculinity, but the current state of men that we're actually bringing and putting out there in the world currently, like from a branding perspective and from you as a personal coach and, you know, developer of fine human beings.
So I think there's something very real, which is the millennial and Gen Z thing. I think that the world that it's Gen Y and Gen Z, yes.
Yeah.
The world that these people are growing up in, and you might be one of them.
No, I'm a millennial. No, I'm actually a millennial. Trust me. I'm not uncle now.
Well, but what I'm saying is they've grown up in a world that my generation cannot fully grasp. So even their value systems are quite different. Certainly their work ethic is completely different. So the conversation that happens between someone like me and a Gen Z young man or woman is going to be fraught with there's going to be some glitches in there.
Eggshells in,
because we're not coming from the same place, and I am not an expert in those generations, so I will not even coach people from there, because I think I will be doing them a disservice, because I'm coaching for a world that they don't understand, and with a value system that is alien to them. So I just wish them luck.
No, you're hanging them out to dry. Come on now, like at least just.
No, you must know your limitations, Baba. I must know my limitations.
You've tried. You're like, no, this is nothing.
I haven't actually tried, but I can see.
Especially when
because even in my team, and I can see that this person is sincere. He's not trying to be sass me or he's sincere.
That's their lived reality.
Exactly.
It's like we always talk about it. Like I always talk about it with my producer, where we talk about work ethic, right? With my other friends, we also talk about sensitivity. Like, these guys are fragile and sensitive. You're like, if you guys grew up in our era, you guys wouldn't.
And you see, you can't tell somebody who is fragile and sensitive that, dude, you're just being oversensitive. Like because it's so real for them. My daughter and I have this continuing conversation about your feelings are valid. And then one day I said to her, but what if your feelings aren't valid? It's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I've been thinking about it a lot. And maybe there are situations in which the feeling that you are feeling is actually not valid for the situation that we are facing. So, but I can do that with my child.
But you can't do it with...
But I can't be going out there in the streets telling people
that, your feelings are not valid.
The things are not the things.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that authority.
I was actually... I was laughing the other day with my producer, and we were talking about... how, and I hate to use the term generation, but how these guys they have a special way of doing something wrong and still coming up and feeling like they're the victim for being addressed. Like, I'm like help. And the funny thing, you will take a step back and be like, did this guy just do something wrong? And then start feeling like a victim. And you're like, how do we save these people?
And you actually, now you can't engage that guy and say to him, but you're turning yourself into a victim, because that's his real reality and he's sincere in it.
How we worked so hard and then we're like, no, me, I used to do that distance. I used to walk from like Milton to Mziligazi or Milton to Northern, right? And then you work so hard, you're like, my child must never experience Umangolo, right? So do you feel like we the generation before this Gen Zs and the generation that created this Gen Zs, do you feel like they contributed to pampering these kids, saying no?
Yes.
And do you feel like the exposure to, I visit people and then, you see the kid is being raised by an iPad there, you're not monitoring whether they're seeing sexualized content on IG, on their phone, violence. Do you feel like we as parents are slacking when it comes to that part?
I don't want to use the word slacking, because parenting is so hard. I know I've said this already, but I need to say it. Parenting is so hard. To parent intentionally, it requires a lot of self-discipline of your own self-denial, and delaying self-gratification. And not everyone is willing to do that. So yes, the result is then that we do have a generation of kids that are self-indulgent. When I speak with young women and I'm like, self-care, the best self-care is actually self-discipline. Nobody wants to hear that. because that's not the paradigm that they are raised in. So yes, I think we overcompensated, and we went all the way across in overcompensation. Like when I see, so for example, with my kids, and I'm not the world's best parent, can I just put that out there? You do something or you scold the child cries. My reaction is, I'm not scared of your tears. Or someone will come and say, oh, she's crying. I'll be like, her tears aren't made of gold. Like, so what if she's crying? Like, duh, kids cry. It's part of, like,
it's life.
It happens. Lamia sometimes cry. No one comes and fixes my life for me because I'm crying. So, but I feel like people are so like, oh, my child is crying, and they'll run to, oh, my child is in a fight with someone. This happens a lot with girl moms. When the kids get into a conflict, the parents are like swooping in there, doing rescue missions, and like, no. How will they ever learn to resolve difficulties if you're always in there fixing it for them? And they do it all the way from nursery school to university. They are always in there fixing the children's. So what can we expect? What kind of adults can we produce?
If someone is married now, you always want to be in there fixing the problem. And so, on just one last point, like, what are the 5 things that you really love about this beautiful place you call Zim?
Oh my word. It's just driving here this morning, I was thinking this weather is just perfect. Like, it's not too cold, it's not too hot. The trees, the new roads. I feel so appreciative and so grateful to be Zimbabwean in Zimbabwe. I know that probably the experience of being Zimbabwean is different for everyone, but even when I go, I actually spend a lot of time in Bare. I spend quite a bit of time in downtown because I have interests there, and I also believe that as a marketer, how can you not know
what's the
pulse of the market? And what I find there is a lot of optimism. People are busy. Oh, mama bayahoda izinto bayathengisa, busy. Like, we're engaged in making a living and making a plan and making commerce and making things work. And I love that about us. I love that we are diligent people. It's a foreign thing to me to have Zimbabweans abachona nje belele begiqiqa. I have an entrepreneurial women's membership called Flourish, and we have this thing about, once you are an entrepreneur, you cannot nje chono horizontal.
I like that term.
Like, those are civilian habits, which as entrepreneurs
you can't.
We must leave behind. So I love our humor. I love our warmth. You can't be a stranger in a Zimbabwean family. Once you've been there once,
you're like,
yeah, it's just beautiful. And obviously all the wealth of talent. Zimbabwean kids, adults, professionals, everywhere in the world, we're just flying. We have so much to be proud of. Gujeli, so much to be proud of. It gives me goosebumps. Yeah, and I my full name is Thembe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was always wondering, like,
why does she spell it?
It's supposed to be an I. I think it's Thembe, not Thembe. And I was like,
yeah, it's Thembe. And I really internalized that. Nile Thembe about Zimbabwe, about my own life, even about Africa as a whole. It's an important thing for me.
And I'll 2 more questions that I promise I'm done. I promise. what, like, in your 32 years of living, at what point did you say your adulting years showing me flames? Like, at what?
There were many. There were many years that I felt that way. But I think probably the hardest was when I left corporate. I left a job as a CEO or an executive director and decided to go into entrepreneurship. I received money from an investor. In 6 months, it was gone. The business was dead. I had 2 small children in private school. I didn't have a plan, and no one wanted to hire me. I would say, yeah, those were flames.
But the investor, if I go private school, did you pay the?
No, not even. I'm so disciplined. I put the money in the business, but the business didn't work. And speaking of finances, it ties into the next question I really wanted to ask as well. Like, in the current Zimbabwe that we're living in, what advice would you give to young people out there on how to actually deal with their wealth and their finances? And like, that's like, because that's you find marriages break down, and you find a lot of families break down because of the lack of finances. What advice would you give? You look at the Birkin bag you had and the Burberry you were in, the G-Wagon parked outside there, like, people are going to believe you, right?
The finances that you like, what advice would you give to young people out there when it comes to finances and handling their finances, the little that they might have or the much that they have?
I would say to be disciplined. My parents told me that when they started out, they used to live on half of their salary. So they would receive their salary and they'd put half in savings. And then, but you have to
be disciplined.
Yeah, you have to mentally tell yourself, this half, that's all I have. So I guess I didn't do that. So I don't think it's advice that I should be giving other people, because I found that very difficult. It's too hard for me. I don't know what to say. What I've said to my girls is, before you get married, buy a house. Buy some property. But that's not helpful if you can't manage the little. Like when I was telling you how I was living Lumumbu,
I just thought you were trying to look fine and you're on a diet.
As a meal. No, that was me
balancing.
Yeah. In fact, here's the advice that I would give, is to say, what you have is all you have. So don't live a life like you have more. I see somebody who's earning a little bit, doesn't want to go and rent. Like, my mom has a lovely cottage, Ngalenge Mover, and a room is $20. She doesn't want to live there. The chick.
She wants to be in the flat.
She wants to get a flat in the avenues. But you can't afford it. Like, what you have is what you have. Make peace with that and live accordingly. I think that's probably the biggest issue that the people you're describing have, is that they are living a life that is beyond what they have. Yeah.
Thembe Khumalo, thanks a lot for coming through, guys. Her book, Words and Other Weapons, is out now. You can order it at, where can they find us?
In Bulawayo, you can get it from Orange Elephant. In Harare, you can get it from Book Fantastics, and it's available in about 40 online stores, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc., etc. Take a lot, yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you were offended, we did a splendid job. If you were inspired, we did an even better job. This has been The Bold Exchange. Thank you.